Okay, is anyone listening? All right, good. Good afternoon, and welcome to CUNY School of Professional Studies webinar titled, Is Anyone Listening to You at Work? I'm Carol Robbins, Academic Director at SPS in the area of Human Relations, which offers programs in management, adult learning, and transportation management, and I want to introduce you to Beth Rosen, who teaches in our newest in-person degree program, the Bachelor of Arts in Human Relations. In a few moments, Beth will be addressing a critical question, a question that many of us face every day. Is anyone listening to you at work? Professor Rosen is a therapist, a novelist, an avid swimmer, and most important, a passionate teacher. She currently teaches wonderful courses and workshops in communication and listening throughout the New York area, and I'm proud to announce that this spring she will be teaching interpersonal and group communications in our Human Relations BA program. Again, welcome everyone. Beth Rosen, is anyone out there listening?
Thanks, Carol, and thanks to everyone out there for signing on. Even though I actually can't see your faces, I'll do my best to connect with you. 10 years ago, I was visiting someone in the hospital. As I got ready to leave to go teach, a nurse asked me what my class was about. And when I told her it was called Speaking and Listening for the Professionals, she laughed and she said, "Can I come too? I need to come. I need to have you come here, or can I come there? We need a class like that." Almost everyone I tell about my listening class says the exact same thing to me. I'm curious, do you sometimes feel people don't listen to you, or that they don't listen to each other either, at home or at work? Sometimes it's really difficult to listen to our family members, and this is really true at work too. We're usually interacting with people at work for more hours than we are with our own families. So in some ways, the people at work are like our second family, and we often don't make an extra effort to listen well. I'd like to tell you about an interaction I had with my daughter 20 years ago when she was 8. It's part of the reason why I'm here today talking to you about your listening skills at work. You see, I thought I was a really good listener, but I realized back then that there was a lot more to listening than to just hearing the words being said. My daughter Emily was in the kitchen with me. I was washing dishes. She was sitting at the kitchen table. We were talking, and she told me that there was a project that she was working on with a friend during the school week, and she wanted to know if she could work with her friend one night and sleep over her friend's house before school. I said no. So she repeated it to me again, and I again said no. And she said, "Mom, you're not listening to me." And I said, "Oh, sorry, I thought I turned off the water. I sat down next to her, and I asked her to tell me the question again. And she told me why she wanted to stay at her friend's house. And again, I said, "No, that's not possible." She said, see, you're not listening to me." And I said, "Well, I am listening, but I'm not agreeing with you." And that's when I realized that there was so much more to listening than just taking in the information and responding. Because from her 8-year-old point of view, I wasn't listening. And that was very important for me to understand. Since communication is an art and not a science, we need to keep in mind how we speak and how we listen to others. And if we're really lucky, the people we're talking to will do the same. But often this isn't the case, and either at home or at work. There's time constraints, the personality issues, hierarchies, workloads, and the many emotions that get triggered at work are a few of the obstacles to listening well. Today, I will talk about some of the obstacles that get in our way and the effective listening skills we need to develop. There are many, but since we only have a half an hour together, I will touch on a few. Then I'll give you 3 examples, and there will be 10 minutes left to answer your questions. And I'm especially curious about an interaction you may have had that you wish you handled differently, or that you wish the other person handled differently. Obstacles to effective listening. Having strong emotions, either positive or negative ones, is a very important obstacle to pay attention to. One of the biggest obstacles is how we're actually feeling at the moment. Even if we're excited, which is positive, about some news a coworker or supervisor is telling us, we might have to have them repeat it to hear all of it. For example, how much would you hear right after you were told out of the blue that you were getting a raise? And there is no question that feeling anxious or scared makes it extra hard to hear well or retain the information. This is true for students in the classroom as well as anyone at work. Being judgmental, feeling superior or inferior. Doing this will definitely prevent us from listening with an open mind or heart. Physical or emotional pain or exhaustion. This kind of stress can really interfere with being able to focus on what someone's saying. Being unable to put aside distracting thoughts or feelings. If we are thinking about something else while someone else is speaking, we will miss some or most of what they've just said. Not caring, not being motivated to listen. Sometimes we aren't willing to make the effort to really pay attention. Being distracted, externally or internally. It's lunchtime right now. Is your stomach growling? Will that interfere with your being able to listen to this webinar? Giving unsolicited advice or interpretations. Have you ever listened to someone who was complaining about something at work and you said to them, well, maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do that, and then they get irritated with you? Why do they react that way when you believe you're just trying to be helpful? Sometimes the person needs to vent, and they want you to only listen, not give them advice. What gets us to give advice when it's not being asked for? You see, without even realizing it, sometimes we're trying to get them to stop complaining about this. When someone gives you advice, when all you really want is for that person to listen to you, do you feel like he or she is either criticizing you or they want you to stop complaining? Believing your opinions are always right. Now, this happens at home and at work, true? Prejudging or stereotyping. We must check our beliefs and assumptions about people. We wouldn't want them to prejudge us, right? Misunderstanding. This happens at work often, and many times we don't address it, and it often snowballs and gets out of control. And being defensive. This is very common and makes it almost impossible to listen, and it often causes the other person not to listen to us. Effective listening skills. Be focused, calm, and patient. Put aside what you're doing or thinking about and be as fully present as possible. Can you do that right now? Be fully present. Show interest by being curious. Ask questions. When we ask questions, the speaker will often feel we care what they're saying. Check your reactions and assumptions. Can you keep an open mind? Are you too quick to react before they finish speaking? Demonstrate verbal and nonverbal openness. Speak without a critical tone. And remember, your body language tells the other person if you're listening to them. Paraphrase for accuracy of understanding. You know, I recently heard about a young woman's experience at work. She had just graduated from high school, and it was her very first time working in an office. Her coworker gave her a stack of papers, pointed to the other side of the large room, and told her to make 10 copies of each document. She nodded and went to do the task. But as she fed the machine in the corner of the office, she realized the document was being shredded instead of copied. She panicked and told her coworker what had just happened. The coworker blamed her, And while it's true that she fed the wrong machine, and it would have helped her if she had asked which machine to use, actually the coworker could have also made sure she was using the correct machine. This is a good example of how the listener and the speaker are responsible for making sure the information is understood correctly. Listen to your internal voice and check judgments. Be careful not to close yourself off to what they're saying. Show appropriate empathy and compassion when it's sincere. And by the way, it's almost impossible to be empathetic if you're angry. Give advice or interpretation only when someone asks for it. Wait for the speaker to stop talking before speaking. Interrupting someone is very common, but it will prevent you from fully listening to them. Work at remembering. When possible, take notes. And speak in a way that encourages others to listen. What is the difference between these two statements? I have to have this taken care of right away versus, is there any way you can do this as soon as possible? Which statement would you rather someone say to you? Whether we're talking about our experiences at home or at work, it takes a great deal of effort to listen well and speak in a way that others will want to listen. Now I'm going to give 3 examples. I'm using my own situations so I can reveal exactly what I was feeling or thinking during each interaction. The first question, what do we do or say when we believe the person is not listening to us? Well, this is a personal example, but it can happen at work with a coworker. Years ago, a relative and I were arguing. While I watched her get up as she was speaking to me in a raised voice and start to pace, I thought, God, she is not listening to me. And then I realized, well, I'm not really listening to her either. So I leaned back in my chair and decided to listen to her the way I wanted her to listen to me. I completely let go of what I wanted to say and gave her the space to tell me what she felt. I listened and encouraged her to tell me more. And when she was done, not only did she feel like I was listening, she actually asked me to tell her what I was feeling. It felt like magic. But I wasn't a magician. I was doing something that was both simple and hard to do. I closed my mouth and opened my heart and mind. It was the first time I had ever done this with her during an argument, and it was the first time she had ever asked me during an argument to tell her what I was thinking or feeling. So miracles do happen when you really listen to someone without interrupting them and without insisting they listen to you first. And if you can stay open to listening to what the other person has to say, even if you don't agree, they just might be able to listen to you too. The second question, what do we do when someone is asking us for feedback? Do we tell them the truth? Will they be able to hear it if it's negative? Will we be able to give them the space to be annoyed if they don't like what we've just said? Years ago, my supervisor asked me for feedback about a decision she made. I hesitated since I wasn't happy with it. Would she really want to hear how I felt? Then I thought, she and I have always gotten along well. Maybe it would be okay to tell her how I felt. After all, she was asking for feedback. I took a breath and told her, I'm disappointed. She became defensive and sounded annoyed. I held my tongue but said to myself, well, then why did you want me to give you feedback if you aren't going to be open to hearing how I feel? I didn't make a big deal about it and let it go. Why did I let it go? Well, one reason is that I liked her and had enormous respect for her. She had opened up many doors for me, and I was very appreciative. But if I had not liked her or felt she was always taking my work for granted or criticizing my work, I might have gotten angry or held her decision against her, which, of course, would have only backfired on me. Has this ever happened to you? Is it possible, even if you don't like or respect the person you're talking to, that you can be open to what they have to say? Do you stay calm and listen when someone gives you feedback? Can you listen without getting defensive? So, when we feel someone at work is not listening to our feedback or something we're saying, there are many components to our reaction. Can we give the feedback in a way that they will best be able to hear it? Can we listen to them when they're critical or defensive? Do your best in a calm way to let them know you've heard what they've said, even if you don't like what they've said. If you decide to tell them you don't agree with their feedback, can you tell them you'll think about what they've said and really mean it? And here's the third and last example. What do we do if someone is being disruptive and not listening to others in a meeting? There are many reasons why people don't listen at meetings or seminars. Sometimes they're overworked and resent having to sit in an hour-long meeting. Other times, it's because they feel nothing gets accomplished or they feel bored. Can we make the effort to listen even if we'd rather not be at that meeting? A number of years ago, I went to Washington, D.C. to give a seminar. I was invited to the headquarters of a large corporation. I had just given a seminar to their affiliate office in New York and really enjoyed the staff's enthusiasm. Unfortunately, the director of the DC department went home sick right before I arrived that day, and no one filled in for her. So I introduced myself as everyone sat down to eat during the lunchtime meeting. When one of the staff members became disruptive, I did my best to keep the discussion flowing, and I was surprised by her lack of professionalism. And when the meeting was over, a staff member came up to me and said, "I am so sorry Miss J was a loose cannonball today. Usually when our director's here, she isn't so bad." I thanked her for letting me know, but as I left, I wondered, what stopped the other staff members from giving me support when Miss J kept interrupting and being belligerent? Were they afraid of her? There was no way to know the staff's history, but like in a family, we all tend to play roles at work. What role do you play at work? When you're sitting in a seminar or meeting, do you make an effort to listen, even if you'd rather not be there? Do you respect the person who's speaking? Now we have time for a few questions. Wow, there's lots of questions. Let me start with you, Jem. Hi, Jem. Your question is, at what point do you give up? Are there some people that cannot be communicated with? That's a great question, Jem, and this happens to many of us with our friends and family and even sometimes people at work. And sometimes, in fact, we do give up sometimes with a friend or a family member, but at work, we really usually can't give up. So if there's a way to establish some kind of positive, cordial connection with the person separately, individually, then they might choose to listen to you if you have a good connection with them, but obviously sometimes that's not possible. And the other thing that you might want to think about, Jem, is if you can find a way to really listen to them when they have something to say, maybe it'll be easier for them to listen to you. Again, this is not an exact science, and it's very hard when someone has trouble communicating. But do your best to be as calm and patient with them as you can. We do have to try really hard with people at work to communicate. So try not to give up, but really accept that there are some people that it's almost impossible for them to listen well. Okay, let's get in some more questions. Tamar, you've asked, I'm having a hard time getting my partners to write their ideas down to make communication and protocol run smoothly. How can I get them to adhere to this request? Interesting question. My first thought is, are you their supervisor or their coworker? So if you're their supervisor, is it possible to let them know the only way you can respond to their ideas is if they put it in writing? If you're the coworker, can you offer to be helpful and jot down some of their ideas as they give them to you? I'm kind of curious if this question reflects your relationship with these people. Is there something else going on that gets them to not be willing to do what you ask? And is there also like a time constraint? Are they saying they don't have enough time to write these things down? So do your best to connect with them in some positive way so that they'd be more willing to do what you're asking them to do. Okay, we have a few more questions. Indira, let's see. How would you handle someone who is a superior from always interrupting you in a meeting and does not listen? Great question. First, I'm wondering if there's a way to talk to this person in private, because if there's an audience, it's much harder for them to get feedback. So I'd encourage you to talk to this person in private. And when you do, you could ask questions, maybe. You could say, is it that I'm speaking too long and then you need the meeting to move forward? You could take the onus as though you're causing the problem and check first. Does she feel like you speak for too long? And you could also ask a different question, or ask her if she or he is aware of interrupting you. Maybe they're not. And again, like an earlier question, is this indicative of some kind of issue that you have with this person, not just in the meeting? So whenever you want to approach someone, if you can ask them a question rather than make a statement, they might be able to hear it a little bit better. That's my suggestion. Patrick has a question. If a person starts a conversation with me at a time that isn't good for me, I sometimes feel awkward asking the colleague to pick up the conversation later at a better time. Is there an effective way to do this in your experience? Good question. And my very first thought is to very politely say, is there a way that we could speak later? I wish we could speak now, but is there a better time for us? And try to negotiate a time right then and there, if that's possible, so that the two of you can come up with a time that's good for both of you. And again, do this as politely as you can. And we have time for one last question, which is Angela. I asked 2 teachers at work whom I work directly with to call me Miss H. This is how I've introduced myself to the whole staff and students for the 5 years I've worked there. They constantly refer to me by my first name in front of the students and in the classroom. I really want to have a talk with them, both. And it may not come out nice or diplomatic. Any suggestions to get them to respect me before I step out of character? They can listen, but they choose not to. Well, this clearly, there's a long history here that you have with these 2 teachers. This has been going on for 5 years, Angela. And it certainly sounds like they're the ones that are not being nice or diplomatic or respectful. So my first thought is, don't join them by losing your cool. They've lost theirs, but don't lose yours. Is it possible to speak to them one at a time about this? And again, like I've said earlier, is there a way to connect with them in some positive way individually? It definitely sounds like they're trying to get your goat, because they won't say what you're asking them to say. But if there's some way to establish some good working relationship with them, they might be more willing to honor your request. So we've run out of time, and now I'd like to make a suggestion. When you go back to work, can you become aware of how well you listen and notice how others listen? Take your awareness and use it to enhance your ability to listen effectively. It can make a huge difference to how you feel at work and may even have an impact on how others listen to you. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar.